Good morning, everyone. It's 10 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us this morning and welcome. This is Ashley Spurgeon with the Building Decarbonization Coalition, and welcome to our first Building Decarbonization Coalition Presents of the new year. This series brings top thinkers, doers, and disruptors to the public through monthly presentations of the latest research, best practices, technologies, and ideas. We're starting the new year off with a bang, the appraised value of carbon-free homes with Deborah Little. I think everyone on the phone today will agree with me when I say that carbon-free homes are the best. Their high performance and emissions reducing efficiency elevates the quality of life for their occupants, plus they deliver multiple societal benefits towards cleaner air and water and as a bankable power grid resource. But we need to see that value reflected in their appraisal. So today, Deborah Little is going to talk to us about the appraisal approaches and challenges of carbon-free homes and what we can all do to support this process. So thank you for joining us this morning. I just want to give a very brief introduction to the coalition, and then I'll turn it over to Deborah. The Building Decarbonization Coalition, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, is a nonprofit group made up of energy providers, utilities and PCAs, manufacturers, design and construction, local governments, and NGOs, all coming together to work collaboratively on building decarbonization. We are proud to say that we have over 125 founding members all working together to develop solutions to the market and policy challenges of building decarbonization. We have the best membership of any organization in the world, and if you're not a member yet, you need to be. So please reach out to me after the presentation with any membership questions. We adopted a roadmap nearly a year ago today, and I'm guessing most of you on the call are pretty familiar with it at this point, but if you're not, it's on our website and you should check it out. In this roadmap, we outline 5 philosophical overarching goals. These 5 goals really lay out what the coalition thinks are the most critical guiding principles for the state. And the first goal is about building awareness of the issues related to building decarb. And this webinar series that we put on is one of the ways that we achieve this goal. It helps us raise awareness about different issues and topics related to building decarbonization. Plus, they're pretty fun. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. And if you have any ideas on other topics you'd like to hear about in the new year, please reach out to me. So we've had 90 people register for this webinar, so you're all muted, and we're going to request that you ask all of your questions via the chat feature of Zoom. As you're listening to Deborah, please feel free to put your questions and comments into the chat, and I will moderate at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Deborah and let her get started.
Good morning, everyone. So, Ashley, are we good?
Yep, we're all good.
Okay, all right. So thanks so much again for joining this webinar. So I like to use photos that are representative of projects that either I've been involved with or my friends. And this is a really beautiful retrofit project by Bronwyn Berry. So it's a all-electric, solar-powered passive house. And it actually won an award from Silicon Valley Clean Energy this past year. So today we're going to be talking about what's happening today with appraisals of these high-performance carbon-free homes and the assets that might be specific to carbon-free homes. And we'll look at the appraisers' perspectives and some of their processes and how we might help those to realize our goal of realization of full and fair value in the appraisals. And then I've got a few tips and tools to help equip you for success as you go forward in your own appraisals or your clients, friends and family. So the resounding message that I'll be repeating today is we need to make home performance data more visible and accessible, particularly project details data. One of the areas that we can help with that is in documentation and communication. So appraisals are for more than just the sale. We need them for refis, for improvement loans, estates, divorces, asset management, and for insurance claims. The valuation of carbon-free homes is really not magic. It's nothing different than for high-performance, energy-efficient home. So through both efficiency and renewables, we're going to reduce the consumption, reducing the operating costs, which produces a number, the energy savings number that appraisers can use. And we can also look at the beyond energy benefits, as particularly durability and quality. Just about every quality feature or measure that we install is going to contribute to quality, be contributive to value. We want to recognize that energy efficiency contributes value to multiple ways, not only just to homes, and each one of these sections could have a list a mile long, but to society, to the environment, to the grid, and bankable avoided costs. And so we're reducing demand. When we reduce demand, we're often reducing emissions, but not always. You're focusing on emissions reducing energy efficiency, and that often means we're going to be aiming for peak shaving. We want to reduce consumption during the hours of the highest emissions intensity. Energy efficiency does correlate to reduced utility bills, which impacts market value. And I'm just looking forward to the future where emissions produce a number that impacts value either positively or negatively. And what that might mean is we develop some algorithms that consider every hour, every 8,760 hours in the year. But I know some folks are working on that, and they might even be on this call today. So I'd really love to hear from you. Perhaps we can discuss this a little bit more together and give us some updates at the end during Q&A. But the California Energy Commission does have a directive to develop an energy metric that aligns with greenhouse gas emissions. So what do these homes look like? All the mechanical systems and appliances used in the homes are electric, powered by clean energy. In most cases in California, it'll be solar powered. And I just want to note, even the leaf blower, right? A little bit of discussion on that lately. So valuation today, what are we seeing? How the real estate pros are handling valuation of these higher performing homes. This is an image of a super stellar audience in Bakersfield this last spring, 140 attendees, kind of broke a record for the size class as a solar class, valuation of solar. So I would say in general, it's good news, we're making some progress, we're sort of inching along. Probably still those real estate agents and appraisers that are trained to the level of competency in the country is still probably less than 5%, maybe a little bit more in solar. And a lot of them have attended, more introductory level classes at lunch and learns and such, where their awareness is certainly increasing. And lenders are increasingly accepting appraisers. Appraisals, I'm hearing from appraisers that are saying, as long as they present an appraisal that's credible and even without comparables, then the lenders are accepting them. And I'm hearing from lenders themselves who are saying, so a few national lenders who have asked me for guidance in instructing their appraisers to use the income approach and not rely on comparables. So that's really a giant step. I just want to remind everybody that appraisers are required to have competency in any special property type. It could be horse property, it could be lake frontage, whatever it might be, including high performance. When they accept an assignment, they are saying that they do have competency, the training and experience for that particular property type. But we can really help out with this process by notifying upfront at the time of the appraisal, give the lender a heads up, hey, this house is special, it's high performing, and then it's really sets the process, gets everything off to a good start. And I have a letter that I'll share with you at the end, with the tools that I'll share, that you can use the language of or copy that you can provide to the the lender at the time of when you're ordering the appraisal. So we know the high performance homes have a lot of benefits. They're healthy, comfortable, durable, they cost less to own. And so these homeowners and builders who are investing in them really deserve the certainty that they'll pay off. But how often is that happening? We're still hearing from builders of new high performance homes that appraisal is their #1 challenge. And a lot of evidence from on existing homes. This is Brian and Kathy. They energy upgraded their 1960s ranch little micro farm here in Grass Valley. So they saved 50 of energy savings, And then they added solar, so they're close to net zero. And I just got to notice that my connection's unstable. Let me know if everything's anything I need to do. So this is Mike McFarland's house. He's one of our super stellar experts doing some of the best work. And he built a new, very, very high performing home for his daughter up in Reading. And it's a super high performing, the 5.3 kilowatt solar system can heat and cool the house, all operations all year, plus supply enough power to their electric vehicle for their annual commute. And so both of these homes, neither the appraiser nor the lender recognized any contributed value for their performance assets. So this is really, not fair. This needs to change. Thousands of homeowners and builders are investing in energy upgrades, but they're really frustrated the real estate pros not recognizing added value. And it's true that real estate pros need training, but we have yet to provide them with much data. They need data, that's particularly project details data. They need to understand the improvements and the benefits to the house and the occupants. And it's usually, the builder or the homeowner who understand the work scope that needs to communicate this to the appraiser. So it's really, communication and documentation between all the different stakeholders here. Everyone contributes to the pool of knowledge, understanding the assets and the benefits. So once upon a time, back in the 1860s, there was the first house on the block to install indoor plumbing. And back then, they had large families. The parents had to traipse in and out to the backyard, the outhouse, through the snow, the slate, the mud. It was a mess. As soon as they installed indoor plumbing, their whole lives changed. They never wanted to go back. If they ever had to sell that house, they would probably be looking for another house with indoor plumbing. And they'd probably be willing to pay a little bit more for it. And then before long, as neighbors started hearing and more houses on the block were investing in indoor plumbing and installing it and enjoying it and speaking with their dollars, that they valued this asset. But how many of these homes had sold? When the first one had to sell, there was no market evidence. And that's what the appraisers or the banks are asking the appraisers. The banks need to know, if this house goes into foreclosure today and they needed to sell it quickly or reasonably quickly, how much would the house sell for? And that's what the appraisers need to be able to support in their appraisals. And so we're sort of in this time of transition. We've been there before with indoor plumbing, with air conditioning, maybe going from one car garage to 2 or 3. And I really like this image here. I think it's super compelling evidence of market activity. Anyone who looks at it can deny that there's some market activity here. It's Sacramento Smudge residential solar installs. And the thing is, if we look at, search this area for MLS listings for homes with solar, only a handful of records will turn up. We know that not all these homes have sold, but it still should be much more. So there's a problem happening here, this sort of gap of disconnection that's a problem for appraisals. If agents aren't reporting or reporting accurately, then the appraisers and the lenders conclude there's no evidence of the market affirmation. So the appraisers are required to determine the market value of the home. That's what the appraisal is. And there's a definition of market value refers to the buyers acting knowledgeably. They need to be informed. And I would contend that this is not happening as often as it could. There might be, a young couple that have an appreciation for energy efficiency. They're looking to buy a home that's energy efficient. They're searching for it. They have their agents looking for it. And there might be a dozen out there, but the listing agents of those properties haven't described the assets accurately. And so they aren't able to find them. It'd be the first one to be at that house to bid on it and affirm the added value, but they don't even know it exists. So this is this gap of disconnection that we need to fix. And I just want to say that, when we're talking about providing documentation to the appraiser, there is such a thing as too much information. We need to make this super speedy and efficient for all, both the contractor and the appraiser. So we know that a lot of homeowners, when they get a deep energy upgrade, they're going to end up with a stack of documents. If they hand this stack of documents to the appraisers just don't get paid enough to go through all of it. So the AJO one-page report is a solution I've been working on. and this is not to illustrate the details of the report, just to sort of say that a lot can be said on one page. And if we can say it more simply and efficiently for folks, we should. This really is a perfect amount of information to include in a listing or even an appraisal report.
Deborah, you're cutting in and out on
for
us.
the lenders.
Deborah,
Yeah.
we can't hear you. You're cutting in and out.
Yeah, I'm not, I can switch to my other computer. I don't, it might have a better connection. Can you hear me now? Is this
Yes.
better? Is this better? Like this?
Let's keep going and see, but it seems better.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'm not sure what to do about that. Okay, so you can hear me now.
I can, yes. Thanks, Deborah.
Okay, well, let's keep going. So we want to make it easy with documentation. The first question the homeowner needs to ask, or the appraiser asks of a homeowner with the house with solar, is if it's owned or leased. And more over 50% of residential installs of solar in the last few years are leased, and lease systems do not contribute to property value. So we need that documentation. And amazingly, often the homeowners can't even answer this question correctly. There's been a lot of confusion with the lease systems. We need to get that documentation, and oftentimes it ends up being a lot of time for the appraiser that they aren't getting paid for. So how much easier would it be for them just to be able to go straight to an electric box, the appraiser or anyone doing an inspection, and find some documents there? It can be an AJA report, it can be anything that you have to help them understand the assets, the performance assets, sort of a heads up. So are we doing okay? You guys can hear me?
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay. So this assets section, I understand that a lot of folks on the call understand these assets, so this isn't so much instructional as to sort of say, give you a couple examples of real life homes. So Mike's house, it's 2,400 square foot house, heated and cooled by a 3/4 ton heat pump. Super high performing enclosure, advanced framing with less wood, reduced thermal bridging. He's got 2 stud corners, single top plate, reduced wood around the windows and doors, insulated headers, sealed super tight, 0.52 ACH 50, insulation, interior and exterior. So the walls are R30. And this is not exhaustive, just a few highlights, you know. So then it's mechanical systems, heat pumps for heat and space, heating the space and water, and electric heat recovery ventilator. So we've got his proof of performance measurements here. The annual energy use was 5,089 kilowatt hours as compared to 11,000 of a similar code built house. And the actual production of his PV was 8,032. So we'll take a look at an existing home upgrade with Brian and Kathy. They saved 56%. And something I don't have time to talk more about is today as soon as the upgrades were installed, his asthma symptoms disappeared. That's a benefit that they're super excited about. So his pre and post attics had relatively ineffective insulation. They raised the air barrier from the bottom of the attic, or the attic, to the roof. Added a couple layers of rigid board on the outside, so it's super. Now got the mechanical systems in conditioned space in the attic. And see how leaky it was before. The poor elderly woman who owned the house paying a fortune for heating and cooling, so much going to the outside. Today ended up with a 1.5 ton heat pump, a heat recovery ventilator, and they've got an electric tank for the hot water. So here's some energy measurements. We've got the before in the blue, the after in the orange, and then with solar down in the gray. So they started with 22,778 kilowatt hours a year, and they reduced it to 10 and then added solar. So now they got down to about 3,000, and they did a little more improvements even after that. They had done nothing yet to the walls. They still had a single pane aluminum window, so they replaced the windows that gave them 12% more savings and induction cooking. now they're down to 94% savings. And another really interesting thing that we showed is that during the same night actually as the fires in Napa Sonoma in 2017, we had some fires up here, and we lost 28 homes. And one of the fires came right up to Brian and Kathy's house. It actually singed their siding, melted some of their roofs, but they suffered from no smoke infiltration in their home, and all their neighbors, they weren't able to go back and live in their homes for weeks. But Brian and Kathy were able to go home the next day, and so the air tightness in their home just proved itself out to be just excellent. But just a real quick, we're still following, the fundamental principles of building science, super high performing enclosure, and when it's almost always going to be that. When we have a high-performing enclosure, then all the mechanical systems in solar will be smaller, they'll cost less, and all the life cycle costs and emissions costs in manufacturing and operating will be less. When we're aiming for emissions reduction, if that's our first goal, it's always going to depend. We always remember that that's what, it's a case-by-case basis. So mechanical systems we're looking at high efficiency heat pumps for both space and water heating and air conditioning. And then the last step might be for the homeowners to go with induction cooking to be able to disconnect the gas lines, champagne all around, and really reach those emissions. So we're looking at optimizing through efficiency, electrifying everything, and then powering that with clean energy. But it might not actually stop there. There's a lot more that can be said about storage and the load shifting, and a lot more than I can say in just this one slide. But as the sun sets, so does our solar power. We're still facing the peak evening hours. So there's a few things we can do with storage and with some behavioral decisions and running things at different times. Just one example is the heat pumps, to add controllers so that the heat pumps are heating the hot water during the day, during the solar power, clean energy, and not running at night. So we're reducing the consumption during those emissions times. And this, if we're on time of use, is not only going to reduce the kilowatt hours, but reduce the costs at an even higher rate. So that if the homeowners have, because they're higher rates in the peak hours that they're paying for the utilities, the homeowners have their utility records, be sure and provide them to the appraiser, and we'll be able to use that in the appraisal. So now we're going to look at valuation, and this image actually gives us some hope. Back in the mid-2000s, late 2000s, a lot of developments were built with some high efficiency assets and solar, and some of them were built in sections next to those sections or completely separate developments in the same area, same size, locational value, but without the efficiency assets. So now as they're starting to go through their resale phase, they're starting to give us some comparables that are usable. We're still having the problem of the agents not reporting accurately, so it's not quite as good as it could be. And I just want to note that a lot of the studies that have already been completed that are showing premiums for high performance homes at, from 2 to 5, sometimes upwards as 9%. Those studies were done on the same lack of data that we've had. When we start making this data more accessible and visible, then the premium studies will probably be showing up higher premiums values. So when an appraiser, one of the first questions we might ask is, what's the difference? What sets this house apart? A high-performing house, we go up to look at the inspection from the outside. There might not be anything that grabs our attention that says, hey, this house is high-performing. And we might have a pre and post. Here's a really awesome retrofit down in Long Beach, and we might be comparing the pre and post or comparing the upgraded home to another house in the neighborhood. The appraiser comes up and looks on the outside, and yeah, they see that solar system, but does anything else tell them that it's high performing? They go inside, sort of the same thing. They might notice the induction stove, but they won't be able to tell the attention to air sealing, insulation, and such. So it really helps if someone's there to communicate and to help provide some documentation to help the appraiser really understand what's installed. So we have to identify those assets. What's the work scope of the upgrades? Get some documentation. We want to understand the motivations of the homeowners, why they made their decisions, what benefits were they seeking and now enjoying, and we need to know what kind of questions to ask about the comparables. You've all heard about the market approach where we need comparables, and this is what the banks always want us to be able to deliver, but we have a few different approaches. And even more than these three basic ones, some tools that appraisers can use. And appraisers are actually required to consider each of the three approaches in every appraisal and then sort of reconcile those. So let's take a look at each one. And I don't know how much you guys want me to bring you through the details of the appraisal process. So for those of you that are interested, here we go. Just a little bit, not totally exhaustive. So an example, sort of a simple example of the cost approach. Brian and Kathy's solar system, we know their gross cost was $25,000. They took advantage of the federal tax incentive, 30%, and they had no other incentives. So their net cost was 17. And if their solar system was not brand new, then we deduct some depreciation from that. And so the income approach is calculating the present value. That is, what is the lump sum that at a discounted rate that a buyer would be willing to pay today for the opportunity to receive some future cash flows. So we've determined that the present value of Brian and Kathy's solar system is $27,704 through the PV value tool that I'll tell you a little bit more in a minute how we got to this number. And their depreciated cost, this is 3 years old, is $15,628. So we're comparing the cost to the income approach, these two approaches, which is what appraisers need to do. And in this case, they would go with the 15 cost approach because there's a premise that says a rational person will not pay more for what they can buy new. So the cost approach is usually representing what someone can buys new. And if we have a range of values for the different approaches, the cost approach will really usually represent the highest end that we can max out on the value. So Brian and Kathy have energy savings from efficiency and solar. So the present value of their $26.72 a year savings is $48,000. We add that to the $27,000 present value of the solar, and together they total $76,533. This might be the adjustment that the appraiser uses to add value to their home. May or may not. It depends. So the market approach, they need to consider the comparables, but rarely can we find comparables that have sufficient data that we can use. An example for solar, as something is sort of tangible that we can go and touch and see, it's a big system that's installed, and there's numbers that it produces, it's still kind of difficult. So appraisers need the production number of a solar system. That's the main metric that they need in the valuation of solar, and they can usually get that from the subject, about the subject, but rarely can they ever get that on the comparables, and that's what they need, is something like that to make them usable. But if we only had these three minimal data points, the ownership, the system size, and the age, we can go to this handy data tool, pvvalue.com, and estimate the production and the present value of the comparables, and now those comparables are usable. PV Value is developed by Sandy Labs. It's free, anyone can use it, and it produces a present value number that's a little bit more meaningful than just the straight present value calculations. It includes the local utility rates and escalation rates, degradation, and some maintenance. So it's a little bit more meaningful numbers. So we like to use it when we can. Are you guys hearing me okay? I just gotta know. So I'm gonna keep going unless you tell me. I always like to talk about durability when we're looking at high performance homes and the value. So the remaining effective life question is something the appraisers always ask. And with Brian and Kathy's house, is 56 years old at the time of the upgrade, only had a remaining effective life of about 20 years at the time. With all the enclosure work we did, now it's gonna have maybe another 100 years. And Mike's house in Reading is super solid enclosure. You can reasonably expect it to last 150 years or more. So this is just part of the discussion that we can always have with the real estate agents and appraisers. So the appraiser then needs to reconcile the three approaches. They might have come up with sort of a base range for Brian and Kathy's house as an example of a home like it, but without any of the energy upgrades at maybe around 400,000. The cost to them was about 65,000. The present value calc was about 76,000. And the appraiser probably found a range of value in 450, 480 for homes with maybe different assets, but similarly valued assets. Something we look at the economic conditions, what the market is happening in that area. And then they might look kind of rounded at the cost approach value, because cost usually represents the top end. So it might look like something like this, 466,000 for the reconciled value of this house. Give or take, it's not completely scientific. So what I think we can all look forward to is when houses with that gas appliances or lines start suffering from obsolescence. Obsolescence is a big ugly monster in valuation, and so it might be the last house on the block to sell. So in conclusion here, just going to leave you with a few bright spots I want to point out. This is, and it's gaining momentum. I think it's really, really key to driving demand. I'd like to see it mandated whenever possible. So let's advocate for mandating disclosure. This is, and what we're talking about is disclosure of utility costs at the time of sale is the main thing we're talking about. But this image is of Bloomfield, Iowa, where the mayor last year mandated that all utility records of all homes, whether they're for sale or not, be publicly available. And he did this because they had to have a citywide utility, and he's able to do it. And he expected a lot of pushback, but they got really positive response. So all these cities have mandated disclosure at some level, some at the time of sale, some at the time of listing. A lot of them are using the home energy score, which calculates an estimated energy consumption and carbon emissions associated with this house. So that's all we do is highlight these key metrics to homes and homeowners that are, haven't really been thinking about these energy consumption or emissions at all. And Berkeley mandates a home energy score at the time of sale. Portland mandates at the time of listing. And Portland, I think, is just a really fantastic story. They went from 0 to 3,000 home energy scores in the first 3 months. So all those homeowners and potential shoppers and all their listing agents and their friends and family all are now thinking about these two metrics, energy consumption and emissions, in relation to these homes. But this is just really, really, I think, a giant step forward and can really be helpful in driving demand. So let's mandate disclosure. The second bright spot, I think, is standardization of home performance. Most industries standardize their terms and their data. Up until just a few years ago, home performance did not. But now with HP for home performance, XML, we created this data dictionary and assigned coding language to each term. And so this is reducing the costs of collection and exchange of data and creating the whole infrastructure superhighway of information that we've never had before. So this is really helpful in achieving our goal of increasing visibility and accessibility of home performance data. And we want to, make the information much more available to other stakeholders that can help us to drive demand. So the third is just whenever you run into anyone, any real estate pro, encourage them to develop their expertise. And there's a strong business case for them that they probably are not aware of, especially for the agents. They're going to increase their sales and their profits and their credibility, but they'll earn the best referrals ever. And this is what they probably are not aware of, that these homeowners love their homes. They don't want to ever sell their homes. There's a really low turnover, so they're going to be more than even the best references. They're going to be advocates for these agents. And that's, even better and more valuable to them than increased sales. Here's that letter to the lender that I mentioned before. You can provide at the time of the appraisal order. And this is, there's nothing official about this letter. You can use this language, you can copy it. It doesn't have to be official. It's just sort of a heads up to the lender. Hey, this is a special property type. It's a high performing home, and it refers to our competency rule, just to point that out to them. And it says we've got high performing assets here, and you can describe in your own words if you want to add some more information. And we refers to at the bottom to the FHA, Fannie and Freddie directives that refer to our competency rule. So I hope you get some use out of that. The 2 free tools for you to use. Both PV Value that we've talked about and Ajo are free to use. I don't have time to, I wish I could explain a little bit more about why I developed Ajo and why I think it's really a great solution. You can go to the website and see some sample reports. Here's just a quick shot of the user interface. You can see it's super user-friendly, and it shows pre and post column right there in the same interface, same screen. So here is one of the Ajo's shortest reports. It's just half a page focused on solar only. And this illustrates how an unusable comparable can be turned into something that's useful with only 3 data points. It's fill in all the data at about 15 fields, but you don't have to. If all we have is the ownership, the size, and the age, then that's all we need for the appraisal to then be able to use this comparable and help us support the value there of a home with solar. So, you know, this is just one way we can help to support all our goals to realizing the fair and full value of high performance carbon-free homes. So thank you so much. Here's my contact. Feel free to contact me anytime.
Thank you so much, Deborah. We have had a very robust chat going on while you have been doing your presentation, and we've got quite a few questions for you.
Awesome.
So we're going to start with one asking if these homes are these homes participating advanced energy rebuild through Sonoma Clean Power or other agencies?
Well, I know that some are, so I can't, I can't answer that specifically. But yeah, I know that they've got a lot of participants, and all these appraisal approaches would apply to those homes.
Okay. Another question, how about new houses where there is no before or after or pre-sales upgrade that doesn't have data? Is it okay to use estimates, and where would you get them?
Well, we do have we actually have more evidence that we can use on new homes. It's really important that the new home builder be very clear in their marketing so that the homeowners know, or the buyers know what they are buying. And what's happened in several instances, some sort of success stories with new home builders, is they start developing their own comparables. And after the first 1 or 2 has sold, then they have their own comparables. But until they have those in the same development, they should be able to find homes that are in different developments. And appraisers can go to other geographical areas to use the appraisal. It's much more complex, and they really should get paid more for doing that. Then they have to make those locational adjustments. But this can be done.
Okay, great. Are higher appraisals applicable to MF rental units? That is, can it be demonstrated to building owners that the value of building increases with efficiency, electrification, et cetera?
Yeah, the rental units, if it's income producing property, are actually easier to do the calculations and support the value than a non-income producing property. And the same thing goes with commercial spaces. So there's a strong case for the property owner, if it's the landlord of income producing property, support the added value and be able to have increased rents, much more, maybe increased rents, but definitely higher occupancy rate.
Okay.
Without going into too much, does that answer your question?
If you have a follow-up question, feel free to put it into chat. We'll move on to another one. Are there existing appraisal companies that are currently incorporating HP in their reports?
Yes, there definitely are a lot of appraisers throughout the country that have had the training and understand these assets and are recognizing added value. Not near as many as we'd like to see, but they do exist.
Someone's noticing that in the pre and post pictures, the post pictures have plantings have been reduced or removed, and is wondering if this change is necessary.
Oh, that was a, the whole ownership call there. And I don't know if they had to do it to expand their patio in the front, but they had new plantings. So they were going to try to grow things back.
Okay. Let's see. Are there state or local privacy laws about people's utility bills that stand in the way of performance disclosures? A seller won't or can't disclose past energy use on utility bills?
Oh, the seller can always choose to share their utility bills. The laws pertain to the utility companies themselves sharing information in regards to the privacy of all the property owners and account owners. So when it's the account owner, the seller, and for example, yes, they can share whatever they want, their
Okay.
information.
Is the competency requirement California only, or is this applicable across the United States?
Really across the world. Yeah, and I wanted to say, you asked someone asked a minute ago how if there were appraisers that are recognizing value, and there are, but the other part of our competency rule is if the appraiser does not have the requisite competency, they can partner with someone. They can partner with an appraiser that does have the competency, and maybe they can do it together. And I act as a consultant in cases like that. So keep my email, and if you want to contact me, I'm happy to consult on an appraisal to help the local appraiser to be able to walk them through and see a fair appraisal completed.
Great. Thank you so much, Deborah. One more question. Is there a place where we can find appraisers that understand this and how to find comps, a database of high performance or solar, etc. comps?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and we really do need to have a list like that, a database both for contractors and appraisers and realtors. So there are certain entities like educational entities, including the Appraisal Institute, that you can look up and see appraisers that have completed their courses. There are a lot of other, and just because someone completes a course doesn't mean that they really have the competency, and the problem is, I've taught hundreds of appraisers since 2010. Part of the problem is they might have a really great education, and then they don't get called to for an assignment like this. And so, how many of us remember all the details of a class we took a year ago or more? We really need to have the appraisers get some experience in the field with more appraisals like this. And until then, we can all sort of support each other and have a community that I belong to a couple online forums. Sometimes we have these discussions, but the truth is there's not a lot of activity in homes with either high performance and solar. That's increasing, but until we get more activity, then it's going to be a little bit scarce of the appraisers with the experience.
Sounds like something to work for. In a zero energy house, do you think the value is represented by what the house used to use, or in the comparable, what the average similar house would use?
In the upgraded house, I didn't quite catch that. It should be.
So this ties back to a string that was happening about not comparing to what they used to spend, but comparing to what a comparable house would spend.
Oh,
see if I can find.
Well, the energy savings that would be recognized would be the house, the pre and post of that house.
Okay.
Yeah, the one thing that the home energy score and some other tools do is, and O-Power has done this in adding this, compare your house to your neighbors kind of thing, which is very helpful. We don't really have good data that's accessible for us just to go to a database and compare the current house, a single house, to regional information, average energy use of other homes in the area. We don't have a publicly accessible database that appraisers can do that. And that would be Very, very helpful. Sometimes I try to use the O-Power information on that specific utility bill, but we can't just go in and look at anyone's utility bill and get that for any neighborhood. We need to have access to a specific account. But having that information would be fantastic. The information of like that more refined information. We have like the Rex files, which have I think it's up to maybe 20. It used to be 19, then they increased it to 16. I'm not sure what it is, 1,000 records throughout the country. But I've looked at that and looking at the energy consumption for California homes has not been very close. And I know that some other areas have said that they are much more representative of their area. So that's still a little bit of an inaccurate way to find some comparison numbers.
We're getting a follow-up question, but you may have kind of already answered it. Here, as a buyer, does the improvement matter to me? Isn't that the value to the present occupant?
Yeah, as a buyer, the improvement, if I'm understanding the question correctly, depending on your value, you're the buyer, you decide how much it's worth to you. An appraiser can help point out, and of course the seller should point out the assets and the benefits, and that will be part of your decision-making process. But yeah, you're going to benefit from the reduced energy costs and all the comfort and their air quality and durability and all those benefits that these improvements are resulting in. You're going to be benefiting from that as the buyer. Did I answer? Did I understand that question correctly? I don't know if that was the question they were asking.
Well, probably we have quite a few more questions coming on, but I'll ask one more follow-up and then we'll move on. Where'd it go? They're coming in so fast, guys. The follow-up question is, I think the question is asking more, do you compare to what the previous owner used, subjective, or do you compare to a similar sized home, average use? It should be the comparable home, not the previous homeowner's usage, right? You'd be comparing a heat pump home versus a minimal code built home.
Well, if it's new construction, we might compare the subject home's energy consumption to modeling of a code built home. If it's an existing home, we have the pre and post of the particular usage in that house, we will recognize the savings that has resulted from the upgrades from that house. We won't be looking at comparables. We don't have any reliable comparable energy usage information to be able to do that.
Okay, let's answer a few more questions while we have you. In the absence of data available from the homeowner, where would a realtor or appraiser be able to get information on the energy use, energy upgrades that a home went through? Who, other than the homeowner, should record energy updates so that it can be ensured documentation is actually happening?
Well, as far as the utility usage, really are dependent on the owner because they own that account. As far as the upgrades, if they're permitted, then they should be public records. Most counties keep the permitting records available to anyone. We look up permitting records all the time as appraisers. So there's going to be a certain amount of information that's available publicly. It would be great if we had that. There are folks working on creating databases. Like Portland has a green building registry. So all the homes that are going through their home energy score programs are making that data of those upgrades and their energy consumption related to the home energy score information. That's all going to be publicly accessible. So that's a great database, and we need to see that really throughout the world, things like that.
Are HERS ratings useful?
It can be useful, and that's a good point. Ratings and certifications, appraisers need more than a number or a color. They won't know what a 30 is compared to 120 or a silver, gold, platinum. They need to have the checklist. So if there is a green certification or a rating, provide the details of the reports to the appraisers, and then they can make use of those. Yeah, that's what they need, the project details and the measured results, if at all possible.
I'm going to do my best to read this one. Are the calculator tools inclusive of evaluating solar plus battery storage and smart inverters now in the valuation appraisal?
No.
i.e. how is resiliency appraised?
Yeah, the tool, the PV value tool itself has not incorporated storage, but we can calculate the savings that that storage contributes, and do our own present value calculation of anything that's reducing consumption. That it's all about reducing consumption and how it shows up in the reduced kilowatt hours. So if we can measure that, then we can do the present value calculation of those energy savings and bring that into the appraisal.
This might be our last one. How many years does the conversion cost recuperation take?
That's always going to depend. Conversion as in an energy upgrade project, I guess. You know, it can be, you know, the whole, it's across the board very, I can't answer that question. It depends. A huge variety of ranges. Depends on the extent of the upgrade and how much energy savings there is. So the more energy savings, the faster the payback.
We have a few more minutes, but I don't see any more questions in the chat. Do we have, oh, here's one more. High performance buildings are a risk mitigation approach against climate change, volatile utility costs, etc. How is this captured in an appraisal?
Right. I can't say that resilience or things like health and comfort even can be monetized at this point. I look forward to the day that we might be able to consider that more, certainly in a subjective way, as part of the sales process for the seller to be able to highlight that. And Brian and Kathy have had that testimony that they were, their house wasn't impacted by the fire and it was not damaged by smoke infiltration. They were, and same thing with well, stop there. All those assets, just like any assets, should be pointed up. And there are folks that have, especially folks that have experienced disasters, that will have a greater appreciation for those assets, and it will be much more meaningful to them. They'll probably have, you know, be worth more to them, and they might be more likely to affirm value and paying a higher price than someone else who does not have that personal experience. But it certainly does add value. It can. There are more things that we can do to the house that might cost money to add them, but will produce a much more you know, realistic resilience, and a lot of that comes to the communication of what those benefits will be.
Okay, I think we're going to stop here. Thank you, Deborah, so much for your time for this awesome presentation. I'll be sending the slides around to everyone who registered. And if you have any other questions, Deborah left us her email, so feel free to reach out to her or me. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks, everyone.
So long, everyone.